I want to welcome in Brian Davis of the Austin American-Statesman to really talk about the news out of Big 12 land over the last couple of days. Brian, thanks for joining.
Yeah, you bet.
Now, first up, how surprised were you on the unanimous vote of the board of directors to really give the conference leaders approval to proceed with expansion discussions with potential candidates, especially given Texas's previous stance on the issue?
Well, I mean, not really surprised at all that it was unanimous, especially in the wake of the ACC's decision to not only start a digital network, but push their grant of rights out, another 10 years to 2036. And so that sort of locks up everyone in the ACC for another decade, well beyond what anyone thought was going to be sort of the big finish line in 2025. So I think the Big 12, they're the only league out there with 10 teams. They were the only league that didn't have a championship game. I've long been of the opinion that these other Power 5 conferences are going to start looking at the Big 12 cross-eyed and say, hey, look, you guys need to be more like us than the other way around.
Now, sticking with Texas, how committed, based on what you've heard, are the Longhorns to the Big 12 and the overall success in the long run of the conference?
Well, I mean, Texas hasn't won all the titles. I mean, that's Oklahoma's is the reigning champion from an on-field winning perspective. There's no question about that. But Texas is still Texas. I mean, it's the largest athletic department in the country based on revenue. They are an incredible ratings magnet. They have the Longhorn Network. I mean, it's a very powerful brand, one of the top 5 brands, I would argue, in sports, right up there with the Yankees and the Green Bay Packers. So they're going to carry a lot of weight whether they're winning or not. Now, historically, it's a very successful program, and they're in a downturn right now. But not many people think that's going to continue for too much longer.
Now, I'm sure you've had the opportunity to talk with some of the decision makers related to the Big 12 over the last couple of days since the news broke. Through any of those conversations, what have you heard in terms of potential candidates that are viewed as really leaders for expansion?
Well, I mean, they're very careful not to say anything about a potential expansion target on the record. No one wants to be quoted right now saying, well, I think school X is better than, University Y. But everyone kind of knows the score at this point. I mean, there's no hidden teams out there that are just going to emerge out of the weeds. You got Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, UConn, obviously. To me, those are kind of the top 4 candidates if we were going into a draft. Then you got Central Florida, the largest school by enrollment in Florida. And also got Memphis out there with their FedEx money that has been talked about. So, I mean, they're not going to be able to raid another top 5 conference. Every school they're looking at is going to be a school from the so-called Group of 5, the smaller leagues.
Now I'm talking with Brian Davis of the Austin American-Statesman. Brian, Commissioner Bowlesby mentioned that they're going to explore both 2 and 4 additions to the conference. Given what you've heard, what do you think the sense is in terms of which way the conference is going to lean? Or is it going to be a conference with 12 members, or is it going to be 14?
I think at the end of the day, it's going to be 14. And really, the way this is all shaken out financially, there's no reason to just add 2. You should just add 14 and get on the same level with the SEC and the ACC, and then go from there. So, to me, it's a no-brainer. Get 4 teams in here. You're going to be able to add the number of football and basketball games to your inventory. You can take that and go back to the networks and use that to get a bigger revenue package out of them. But let's be honest here. This isn't about creating new rivalries or trying to make things better travel-wise for West Virginia. This is solely about increasing the numbers, increasing the total number of games, just increasing the number of people in the room at the league table.
Now, moving to UConn specifically, Commissioner Bowlesby mentioned about 5 characteristics that are going to be key in terms of their decision-making process. And a lot of people up here in Connecticut, at least, viewed that as something positive in terms of potential movement for UConn, specifically market, academics, athletics as a whole, as well as fan base. Do you have the same opinion as folks from this region that UConn is a legitimate candidate and should be one of the top priorities? Or if not, what is the perception of the Huskies down in Texas?
Well, you have to understand that everything about this expansion decision revolves around football, okay? Mm-hmm. And so that's why the thing about Houston is, Houston's hot football-wise. You need to grab them. BYU has a great football history. I think they'd be a good fit. But people say, well, you know what? Kansas football is terrible, right? Yeah. Well, Kansas basketball is their claim to fame, and that's what UConn should be touting as its claim to fame. Because if you're going to add 4 more teams and go to 14, I'll be honest, the athletic directors in the league now, they're going to look at, okay, we can beat UConn football, that's no problem. And then it's going to beef up the basketball portfolio of the league, and they're all in favor of that. I think the Big 12 people are intrigued by not so much the geographic location of stores, but being up there in the New York corridor, they can get people to Bristol. If this, I had one athletic tell me, look, we could fly in a day early for a game, and swing over to Bristol, maybe get on ESPN. Those are just the kind of things that they think about and talk about. Now, whether that's realistic, when those time actually comes, who knows? But they certainly have their wheels turning, and I think they have a very open mind as to what UConn can bring.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned basketball because I heard Commissioner Bowlesby on Mike and Mike on ESPN this morning, and he was making a case that the Big 12 hasn't won a basketball title in 8 years, so that kind of sparked some interest up this way as well. But moving on to time frame, I know that the conference leaders really said our next board meeting is scheduled for October. However, we could schedule a special session in between now and then to make an announcement or have an official vote. What's the time frame that you're hearing? Do you think we're going to see any closure before the start of the 2016 football season?
Oh, before the start of the 2016 football season, no, probably not. I think this is something that's going to definitely go into the fall. Because one thing that Bowlesby has mentioned to us is that, most conferences out there require a 12-month notice to leave before anybody can actually take off. And then there's exit fees that are going to have to be negotiated. Like Houston, for example. Houston, I had a Houston Board of Regents chairman tell me yesterday, they probably owe a double-digit exit fee in the millions. Rutgers had to pay $11.4 million to get out of the AAC at that point. So it wouldn't surprise me if UConn faced a stiff penalty like that as well. So there's a lot of legal things that have to be maneuvered around, a lot of legal obstacles. So I don't think we see anything immediately. It wouldn't shock me if we're looking at the 2018 football season, the 18-19 athletic year, as the start of the new Big 12.
And then final question for Brian Davis of the Austin American-Statesman. There's been a lot of reports previously up until now that a lot of the Texas schools wouldn't be in favor of another Texas school joining, specifically Houston. Do you still get that same sense, or has thoughts shifted away from that idea?
Well, I can tell you what I reported today is that, University of Texas sources have told me that they will not try to block Houston from getting into Big 12. The problem is that it's the out-of-state schools that are very nervous, kind of what you're alluding to, like Oklahoma, Kansas, Iowa State. Those schools are very nervous about the idea of having a fifth in-state school, just because it gives the perception that all the power is in one state, right? Yep. And you're talking about if let's say you went to 14 teams, 5 are in one state. I mean, that's a pretty big voting block, right? Because at the end of the day, what's good for Texas is probably going to be good for Tech, Baylor, and TCU and Houston as well, assuming Houston got into the league. So I think some other people are going to have to be sold that Houston is a good fit. But again, so much is made about football. But if I'm the University of Texas, or if I'm Baylor, or if I'm TCU, do I want to put my women's soccer team in a van and drive them down I-45 to play a conference game in Houston? Absolutely, I do.
Yeah.
Do I want to send my women's basketball team right down the road to play them? Yes. Golf, volleyball, you name it. So that's something that is pretty appealing to them.
What you just said kind of brought up one more question from my end, at least something I saw yesterday. Andy Katz at ESPN mentioned something about potential football-only additions. Do you think that's something that the conference would be open to kind of mitigate if maybe a school that's added that's not a geographic fit, maybe they just come in for football?
I know that's not what they want.
Okay.
I mean, that's certainly on the table, but the Big 12 has always wanted a full membership.
Yep.
From everyone in all sports. So I think that the football-only concept would be sort of a last-ditch effort type of thing. Because like BYU is the main school that's always talked about as football-only. But I think the no playing on Sunday thing for BYU has always been a big excuse. I mean, they've managed to play all this time and work around it. So I think that the Big 12 could do that too.
All right, thanks, Brian, for some further insight into the Big 12. And I guess before you go, maybe tell the listeners where they can find you online, and maybe if you also do interviews on the radio.
Yeah, absolutely. On Twitter, you can find me at @bdavisaas for the Austin American-Statesman, and you can find all of our coverage at hookem.com, just like the University of Texas mascot, hookem.com.
All right, thanks, Brian. And should any news break, I'm sure I'll be reaching out to you if you're open to it, and definitely looking forward to talking to you down the line.
Sounds great.